Well, thank you, and welcome to the June 9th, 2022 Board of Sherborn Select Board meeting. As we've commonly done in practice in recent months, we're going to open up with some executive session items and go back into open session probably around 7 o'clock at that point there. So I would like to ask the town administrator to please read just the executive session portion of the meeting. When we go back into open session, we'll read that portion because we'll have a greater audience at that point.
Okay, good evening. So item number 1 is meeting with town council pursuant to general law, chapter 38, section 21A, 3 and 7, and Suffolk Construction versus DCAM 449 Mass 444 parentheses 2007 to obtain legal advice regarding 5565 Farm Road, Sherborn. Item 2, general law, chapter 38, section 17A and 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law, review executive session minutes pursuant to general law, chapter 30A, section 22, F and G. You'll need a motion and a second.
All right, as chair, I declared, as chair, I declared an executive session is warranted for the items as just read by the town administrator. So I move we go into an executive session. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, second by Jeff. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Mary Ann? I think that's aye.
That's an aye, yeah.
Paul?
Aye.
And George?
Aye.
Okay.
All right.
Executive session. Thank you very much. Please turn off the recording. Oh, great. The sun's in my eye. If you can't tell, I have a slit about this big, of which my shades don't cover my window.
We can tell.
All right, thank you very much. It is 7:01. We are just out of executive session and now re-entering open session for the June 9th, 2022 Sherborn Select Board meeting. I would now like to ask the town administrator to please read the open session portion of the agenda.
Good evening. After I read the agenda, the board can vote to amend or approve the agenda as I've stated. The first item was public comment, and we have Neil Kessler here tonight. Items may be taken out of order and topics not anticipated 48 hours in advance may be added. The number 1 item is the consideration of reorganization of the select board. Item number 2 is the consent agenda, which is the payroll warrant for the interim town administrator. Reappointment of the finance director, Deb Seffering, to expire August 9th, 2022. Approval of various pouring license for June 6th, June 11th, and June 12th. Item number 3 is the consideration of vote to release any minutes subject to disclosure. Heather White from Petrini Law is here for that. Release of portion of OPEB Lane, vote of the 4/26/2022 annual town meeting. Heather White is here for Petrini Law. Number 5 is consideration to authorize the chair to sign off on police chief recertification per post-commission regulations. Chief Thomas Galvin will be here for that one. Consideration of general obligation bond for July 22. Heidi Doyle, town treasurer, will be here. Update on long-term bonding concerns, Heidi Doyle, treasurer. Number 8 is ARPA presentation, which is Jen Thompson from Capital Strategic Solution, Diane Moores, Deb Seffering, and Dan Sichel. Number 9 is the review of current requests for consideration of appointment to various boards and committees. And number 10 is proposed 40B Farm Road homes, consideration of comments to Mass Housing. Item 11 is select board reports and interim town administrator reports, and I'm asking the board to consider the selectmen meeting calendar for July 22 through December 2022. That's it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Do I have any amendments or motions relative to the agenda? Anyone?
Oh, I would move that we approve the agenda as read by the interim town administrator.
Very good. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Mary Ann?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
I am I as well. Okay, before the agenda starts, we have a request for public comment. I think I see him there. Neil Kessler. Neil,
Yes,
I see him there.
you do.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's in 2 pages. Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just before my 2 minutes begin, I'd like to say that since this is public comment, I just request through the chair that my time not be interrupted.
Okay, I mean, the only time, usually, these are classically limited to like 2 or 3 minutes. Do you think it'd be more than that? Or how much time do you
I'll be probably 1.5 to 2 minutes.
Very good.
Okay. All right. So I'm here tonight to inform you that I am not seeking reappointment to the Conservation Commission, and that I'm resigning from my 7-year tenure on the commission, first as member and then chair, effective immediately. I know I'm not alone as a town volunteer when I tell you that the select board is crippling the ability of many like me to make a real positive contribution to the town. And though this isn't true of every member all the time, the select board as a body regularly disrespects those donating their time to the town, especially those on the Conservation Commission. For example, on multiple occasions you have, on the public record, disrespected loyal, hardworking Conservation Commission members such as Cindy Ostrowski, Carol McGarry, and myself, and you've routinely violated open meeting law to do so. You create an environment where people feel encouraged to complain about the Commission, and no matter how much or how outlandish their claims are, you accept them as fact without investigation or talking to the Commission about it, instead using them as a basis for decision-making and denigrating comments about the Commission in your meetings. You more generally bring down morale amongst town volunteers by creating an antagonistic environment for anyone you don't like. For example, I was a recent target when 2 months ago a member of your board sent me a series of highly inappropriate text messages that you chose to do nothing about. Your conduct is frustrating, insulting, and will only continue to discourage willing and qualified volunteers from giving to a town that they love and care about. I hope that my resignation is a signal to you that you need to drastically change your approach. Have a good evening.
Very good. And I agree, we won't interrupt. We didn't interrupt, we won't respond. The one thing I want to say, concern, I'm not aware of any open meeting law issues on this. Obviously, we indeed agree to disagree on many issues, but if you have a complaint, you can actually register that with the Attorney General or register it through us or file it with the town clerk as far as any open meeting law complaints. All right, moving on. Agenda item number 1, consideration of reorganization of the select board. So this is, look at this. This is after every town election. It's tradition that we, the select board, elects same or new chair, vice chair, and clerk, and the usual authorities within the board. So I'm not speaking very well here. If no one has any immediate comment, I would like to make a motion. Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate Jeff Waldron to be the new chair of the select board. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Paul. I guess, Jeff, do you specifically have any comment before I tally the vote?
No, I'm fine with it.
Okay, very good. So I guess all in favor, Mary Ann,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Jeff,
I guess.
and I am I as well. Okay, George, I'm sorry, Jeff, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you for your vote of confidence. I really do appreciate it. And it's an honor to be chair. So hopefully I can live up to Eric's standard. So I would like to also make a nomination of Marion to be vice chair of the select board.
Second.
I think you collect the vote now.
I do
Yeah.
collect the vote now. Okay, so I'll let you go first there. Eric,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and Marion.
Aye. Thanks for letting me go last.
And I am I as well. So it's a done deal.
All right,
Now,
and
go ahead.
I would like to make a motion. I would like to nominate George Morrill as the clerk.
Second. And I would ask Paul,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Marion,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
and I am I as well. Very good. So
Jeff?
thanks everyone for your support. Yes, Paul.
Just before we leave the subject, I wanted to thank Eric for his 2 years of chairmanship and guiding us
Absolutely.
through the COVID period where things were not as smooth as having regular meetings. Thank you, Eric,
Thank you,
for your
Paul.
service.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Very well done. Thank you,
Yeah.
Eric.
Totally,
Second that,
totally agreed.
second that.
So we'll move on to the consent agenda now. Does anyone want to make a motion regarding the consent agenda? Payroll warrant
Approval.
appointment. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Marion,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
and Paul.
Aye.
And I am I as well. Consent agenda is approved. Now I don't know if you want to speak to it, Heather, or to introduce the subject. We're going to now consider a vote to release minutes that are subject to disclosure. So
Jeff, just you might want to introduce Heather because I don't think a lot of people
Yeah.
know who she is because she's
yes,
fairly new to the town.
Heather White is a recently joined Chris Petrini law firm and is one of several attorneys supporting our town council efforts here in Sherborn. So we're welcome her to the team.
Thank you, Mr. newly appointed chair. Members of the
I know,
board,
I know.
Heather White, from the council's office. Yeah, just briefly, you have a package of executive session minutes with some minor redactions to continue to withhold some attorney-client privileged information. But aside from those redactions, a motion to release those executive session minutes would be appropriate.
Someone want to make a motion?
Well, I would, but the problem is we want to read the dates of all the
I know. I don't have it in front of me.
minutes and I don't have the motion in front of me. So
Do you
I
have it,
can do
George?
it. I can do it.
Okay,
Just a second. I'll move that we release the executive session minutes from December 2nd, 2021, item number 3 only. December 16th, 2021, item number 3 only. January 7th, 2022, and January 13th, 2022.
I'll second that.
okay. We've got a motion and a second. Marion?
Friendly amendment. I think we should include except to the extent that the attorney-client privilege applies.
Okay.
I'll accept that friendly amendment. Thank you.
I'll do it for my second.
Okay, so Marion,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Barrett,
Aye.
Paul,
aye.
and I am I as well. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
The next item, which you will advise us on also, is release a portion of Obed Lane, which we discussed at a prior meeting, and now we're voting on that.
That's right. There was a town meeting vote to grant that authorization to the select board to move forward with releasing a portion of Obed Lane. The form that you have in your materials is a step in the process to be filed with the land court so that ultimately that portion can be released.
Does anyone on the board have any questions?
Seems very straightforward.
Yep. Okay. Just want to make a motion?
I move that we release the right title and interest on the portion of Obed Lane as presented in the background material, consistent with town meeting vote.
Second.
Marion,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
and Paul,
Aye.
and I am I as well. Thanks again, Heather.
Thank you. Y'all have a good evening. Good evening.
You too.
Thanks,
Take
Heather.
care.
I do want to make a friendly comment that Heather's actually not new to Petrini Associates, actually worked with them for years and is taking a greater role right now. Or
Oh, I didn't realize that.
She's
I
new
thought-
to us in Sherborn. That's
All right,
what I meant.
I thought you joined from another firm. I'm sorry.
All good. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Item 5, consideration to authorize the chair to sign off on police chief's recertification. So Chief Galvin, you're gonna
Well, good evening.
lead us
So,
through this?
yep, this is this is something new. So this is new before the board. So in 2020, the legislature in the acts of 2020 passed chapter 253, which is commonly being referred to as police reform here in Massachusetts. In that, they created the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. And part of the job of the commission is to certify each police officer in Massachusetts. In July of 2021, initial certification was granted to every officer. And now what they are doing is they're beginning the first year of their rolling 3-year recertification period, where they recertify based on officers' last names. So the first year, which we fall under, is A through H. So where I am covered. So for the police department, as the police chief, I'm able to go through this process for the certification of each one of our officers. But as the appointing authority, it's required of you to perform my recertification. So in your packet, there were two forms or two documents. The first being an attestation document, and the second being an officer questionnaire. So the certification process requires these two parts. So packet one would be done either by the appointing authority or their designee, and those are questions that they have to answer about the candidate. The second packet is the packet that is answered by the officer who is up for recertification, and they're answering questions about themselves. So with the first packet, there's a couple of ways it can be done. That the agency head or the appointing authority can go through the packet and do it themselves, or they can designate someone who is in a supervisory authority over the person that they're doing. So one of the things that the board could choose to do tonight would be to designate Diane to go through and do the interview portion with me, which honestly we've already done, and that we did complete that packet in case you choose to go that route. And then the second packet, which I've already completed, I attached. So if you choose to vote to authorize Diane to be the person that does that interview of me, if you review the materials and you find everything up to the proper standards, would be to just sign page 3. And if not, if you'd like to set it and designate a board member who would go through part 1 with me, we could do that as well. The only thing I would ask is there's a deadline with the submission of these documents of June 15th. So once this process is completed, there's actually a spreadsheet that I complete. And with some of these documents, I return them to the post commission for review, and they will then certify all the officers in our department.
So, Jeff,
Go ahead, Paul.
so I've reviewed the submissions and find them to be completely in order. I believe I'm especially qualified to do that review because, as you know, I've been assisting the general court in connection with police reform as a legislative commissioner. The paperwork is in order. The renewal of the certification should happen easily for someone of the qualifications and background as listed on the materials that are before us. So I would like to first recommend that we approve these papers. Secondly, because Diane has already done the interview, there is nothing to be gained by the board going through the same process and asking the same questions and recording the same answers. And therefore, to speed this thing along, I'd like to make a motion first to confirm that Diane Morris is authorized to conduct the interview portion of the recertification of the chief. And secondly, to authorize the chair to sign the recertification forms, the certificate of good character and so on.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any other comment or questions? Okay, Marion,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and I am I as well. Thanks, Tom.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Have a good
Thank you.
night.
You
Yeah,
bet.
thank you.
You too. And I'll come in, just let me know, Diane, I'll come in and sign it or whenever I need to come sign. All right, two next items are Heidi Doyle first talking about general obligation bond for July of 2022, and then an update on long-term bonding.
Good
Are
evening.
you there, Heidi? Now, I
Yes,
do have your presentation, but that's for the second one, isn't it?
Correct.
So I'll bring that up when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much. So the first item is to ask the board to vote to have me proceed with the general obligation bond that will be for sale at the end of July. Funds will be shortly, first one or second, right in the beginning of August, we'll get the funds. All of the items are currently in short-term bonding, except for the new vote from the Dover Sherborn School, the $702,807, which I'd like to move into a long-term bond because the bill is already expected to come in July for this project. They expect to do it in the summer. So because the interest rates are dramatically rising, every week it seems to be going up, and it's not a good scene. So I have a motion to move the treasurer to proceed with a long-term general obligation bond of $6,156,190, which includes the library building, Pine Hill Access Road, regional school roof, and assorted approved capital items from the annual town meetings 2020, 21, and 22.
So moved.
Second,
Sounds good. Marion,
aye.
George,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Paul?
I'm going to, I would just want to comment that this is a very smart move to do the bonding now while interest rates are not quite as high as they are projected to go.
That's definitely the case. And I am as well. So thank you for that, Heidi. Now, should I bring up the your PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, please. So this is just to give the select board and the public an update on debt in Sherborn and where we stand and some ideas of where we're headed. So I can go to the next slide. And for the general public, I just want to go over the types of debts that we have: long-term debt and short-term debt. The first long-term debt is a general obligation bond. Usually that's the term for it, which you've just heard me ask for, and that is fixed payments. And the principal and interest portion of this is part of our operating budget. And on both items, these are all ones that are approved from town meeting votes. They're driven by our capital improvement plan and department needs. The long-term debt tend to have a higher issuance cost. It costs about $75,000 roughly, and sometimes that's covered by a premium, sometimes it may not be. And the short-term debt, which is usually 1 year or less borrowing, and you only have the interest included in your operating budget, only costs about $600 if the items are under $2 million. So usually the procedure has been to do short-term bonding till we know what the amount is and where we're going with it. And once we've gathered a batch together, and it usually means about $3 million, that seems to be the point where then it becomes more prudent to switch to a long-term bond, which is what I just did in the move tonight. And there's different terminologies that you might have heard: GAN, RAN, TAN, and those are the different types of short-term borrowings: bond anticipation note, grant anticipation note, revenue tax, and state aid anticipation notes. And I can go to the next slide. And please, if anyone has questions, the select board, just please interrupt as you go along. So this slide is meant only for a visual overlook. I don't expect anyone to try and read the numbers on this. What each color represents is a different year bond that we have out. So the 2013, 15, 18, and 20, which go out right now to about the year 2041. And if you can just see that various lines are in there, that each capital item is given a line and an amount per year, and you can see when the debt falls off. So we try to go every few years before we add another one, and there's a whole balance plan of trying to keep debt somewhat steady as much as we can and not have it all bunch up in one area. So this is strictly just for an understanding of the timing of bonds that we have.
All right, can I ask a question on that then?
Sure.
You
Sure.
jumped into it.
Yep.
So like green is 13, purple is 15, yellow is 18, and blue is 20?
Correct. So that's why, and then the blue one goes out to 2041. So you
Okay.
can see just essentially that the timing is, that the green, the 2013 one will end in about another 5 years.
Okay.
And then, another is about 8 years for the purple, 2015, the 2018 is going out longer. And we will be adding now the new one, which will go out further than the blue line.
Of course, because the 13 ends in 5 years. In 5 years, there's a new bar, right? That we start new debt to keep it even. In theory.
Roughly, that's what
In
that's the
theory.
pattern I'm trying to look at is say, we're trying not to have all lines end at one time. We're trying to spread it out over a period of time so that the tax burden is spread out among the taxpayers over the use and when we really need the items.
Thank you.
And again, I'm happy to answer any questions. People can contact me if they want to go over specifics and see what's in a bond or go into details on this. Please contact me. I just didn't want to make this too detailed tonight.
Just one question.
Sure.
Now that we're going out for the $6 million bond, that should trigger a review of our bonding rating by the rating agencies. Isn't our rating AAA? And is there any risk that that would be in jeopardy?
Yes, and I was going to get to that actually at the end of this presentation. So thank you, Paul. Anytime is fine to bring that up. Our last Standard & Poor rating was in 2020. Usually when you go out for a long-term bond, that triggers the rating agencies. We will be having a call scheduled on June 29th for this issue. We have been AAA. Last time we were borderline on the AAA. We had actually gone down in one of the categories. I have been meeting, we're trying to strengthen up and see if we can figure out how to increase that category back and maintain our AAA rating. Debt is a portion of it. One of the areas they look at is how much debt is paid off within 10 years. We've been in better shape for the 10-year ratio. However, by adding these longer term projects such as the Pine Hill School, the library, the school roofs, those are all over 10-year items. So that is going to throw that number off slightly, but that's only one factor of it. So the rating agencies have financial factors they look at. One is institutional framework, which is about 10% of their rating. Another one is the economic score, which is about 30% of the rating. There's a management factor of 20%, a budgetary flexibility factor of 10%, a budgetary performance factor of 10%, and a liquidity factor of 10%. And some things we can control, such as the management score, institutional framework a little bit. Other numbers, such as what the budgetary performance are really driven by what happened that year, and we don't have too much control over what the numbers say. One category we went down in had been budgetary performance, but looking at the numbers recently from Melanson Heath in the recent report, that has improved since the 2020 time. So we're hoping to move that. We got an adequate last time. We're hoping to get back to at least a strong, if not a very strong category on that. Any other questions on?
Well, just for the benefit of the viewing audience, AAA is a very solid testimony to the town, to all the taxpayers, and to the management of the town. That's a very favorable bond rating and assists us in placing our bonds and being creditworthy.
Yes. And if there's anyone on the select board that would like to attend the Standard & Poor call on the 29th, please contact me. I'd welcome having a select board member on the call if they'd like to participate.
Well, if you think it would help, I'd be happy to do it, depending on my schedule, Heidi. We can talk offline.
Yes, that's fine. They can contact me. And okay, the next slide, please, Jeff. All right, so this slide gives us the debt totals over the last 5 years, and then I added a last column of an estimate of the 2023. And we have the long-term principal since 2018 on each, what our short-term borrowing principal amounts have been, and then a total debt amount of our short and long-term. And I think the takeaway here is we have been adding on a lot of debt. And you can kind of see when it's hard to see, I don't know if we can go in, but on the 2020, we'd had 5 million, over 5 million in short-term debt. We did a long-term bond at that point, which is why our long-term principal went from 5.2 million up to 8.6 million from 20 to 21. We are now again in a position where we're moving from 7.6 and 22. We've got 5.5 million out in short term. We're moving most of that over, and we're going up to a $13 million long-term one, which is the highest it's been in a lot of years. It is something that I wanted to bring up to people's attention, because we still have about 2.9 million in short-term principal that I will be seeking for this year to cover newer items. So the total debt principal has gone from 2018 to 7.6. It's gone up and down a bit, and we now have a real bump at 2023. There is no interest shown here. The interest is going up and down. And just for everyone's reference, our interest on our 2020 was one of the lowest we've ever had. That was 1.077%. And the interest rates I'm seeing this year right now on bonds are going from higher 3s to low 4s. So it's a big chunk. And unfortunately, the debt service projection we're looking at this year, we may be looking at tapping into the reserve fund to cover some of the interest. But if we don't do it, it's only going up. And then the next slide. And this is for most of the public sense that what was in this new $6 million bond that we're going for. I think you can see the library has an amount, Pine Hill Road has an amount. And over the last 2 ATM meetings, the town meeting votes, we've had town buildings, we've had roads, we've had stormwater. There have been various different equipments for different departments. And then for 2022, the only item I'm moving in right now is the Dover Sherborn roof. And that all comes down to the 6.1 million. And next. So this is looking a little more at the futures, what is going into the short-term borrowing, because I mentioned that we were looking at 2.9 million coming a little bit later on this year as short-term. Of that, I have a proposed column and a maximum amount column. So how I work on this is I only want to borrow what we're going to be using. So an example is town buildings. We're budgeted 190, but I'm only going to be borrowing 100 for this year because we probably won't use all 190 this year. It'll travel over to next year. And the same thing with roads. I'm looking at, we approved 500,000, but I'm probably only going to borrow 250,000 of that. So this breakdown gives you the capital articles. And right now there's an estimate of 1.6 million for the library. So the range would be from 2.9 million up to 3.2 million if we borrowed everything. And my suggestion is to go for the 2.9 million right now. Next. So one of the things is, how do we come up with the capital items and where are we coming up with these debt numbers and what are the plans for our future? This is the 5-year, too bad the slide came out so badly, but it's this 5-year capital improvement plan that we have. So departments are asked and they plan out, this goes from 2023 in the first column up until 2027. And the biggest one is the bottom line that you can see what we have. So in 2023, there was 2.2 million in capital items. That's all right, Jeff, I can just go, it's the bottom lines for the bigger ones.
Yeah, okay.
And of that, I put an amount of what I expected to borrow, which is 1.8. And the difference is that some of these items we funded with free cash. And this last year, we had a good amount of free cash that we could fund a bunch of these items and then not have to borrow. And then going out, you can see next year, right now, it's projected that we'd have 3.3 million in debt, then 2.5 million in debt, 1.4, and then last going out, it's at 950. So there's a fair amount of debt coming up in the next several years. And if we can go to the next slide, we'll see how that plays out.
Well, just to point out that one big jump next year seems to be the roof at Pine Hill School, which we knew was coming, so.
There are a couple roofs on there, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that, it seems to be that $1 million bump next
Right.
year, so.
Right. So I had looked at,
Very necessary maintenance to our buildings, unfortunately.
it is unfortunate. So this is what happened with the debt budget then would look like as a response to this. So if you go down to the third column on the years is FY23, it's now jumping up to 1.8 on long term. I had put initially in the budget, hopefully 1.7, and the difference is going to be, we added the 700,000 this year on the school roofs, which we didn't expect to put in when we were budgeting this back in March. But because of interest rates, we really want to lock that in, and the interest rates have jumped up. There was 1% the last time, we're looking at 3 to 4%. So that's still an estimated number right now. Until you go out for your bids that day, we don't know what people will bid. But in debt service is going up. Nothing we can really do on this. And short-term debt is not in this. This is just a picture of the long-term debt impact on the budget. And coming down to the ending slides, next one, thank you. So here's an example of what we're retiring. In the next 10 years, the left-hand column is from 23 to 2032. What amount of principal are we retiring on this debt? So we're averaging 971,000 amount of debt principal retiring each year on the next 10 years. This year, we're adding about the 6 million. The capital improvement plan is averaging 1.8 million in new debt. So we're almost doubling the amount of debt that we're adding than we're retiring at this rate. So that was one of the slides I kind of wanted to bring to everyone's attention to say, now what can we do about this? We're not in bad shape right now, but it's something I wanted to bring to everyone's attention on.
I think it's
And-
cyclical. It's a little bit cyclical though, Heidi, because these are 20-year roofs or 25-year roofs, and we're doing, if you went back 15 or 20 years ago, we probably had this same bump, and we don't stagger the capital, but you can if if they are on that cycle of life cycle replacement.
Right, but there is a fire truck in this 5-year plan too. There's some other
Yeah.
items besides the roof. So it's just
Yeah.
there,
But our fire trucks we've kept for around some of them 30 years. So
right.
it's an odd situation. But we bought in the early 90s. I think we bought about 5 fire trucks or something like that. So I just think there's a part of this that's cyclical, that we're now just as George said, it's that cycle where these are coming to their useful lives.
Right.
Unfortunately, co-timed a little bit more than we would like.
Right. So, and then next slide, please.
Well, let's just see. Tom Trainer, do you have a question on this slide? He's got his hand up.
Actually, I can wait till the end.
Okay.
All right, so here were some recommendations to me of what can the town do. And I would like us to move to a little more proactive position where I feel we've been doing more reactive planning. A lot of our process has been from the ground out, what do you need, and working it up from there. And again, I want to stress, I feel we can handle this amount of debt that we have right now, but I feel we have an opportunity to manage debt going forward in the next few years. If we know that we're adding so much versus our burn rate, maybe some things can be stretched out a bit, or looking at how to minimize the impact on this. So
Well, I'm stealing Sean's thunder here, but he would tell you that if we do our operations a little bit better, our regular maintenance on buildings, we sometimes tend to let things fall apart and do a capital project to replace something rather than doing incremental maintenance. So increasing the operating budget would be another strategic way to stretch the asset lives out.
right, so I guess I'm looking at getting some more ideas going and developing a proactive plan and becoming goal oriented. I was recommending capital improvement shift to the fall so that items can get fully evaluated before advisory starts rather than at the same time, which I believe advisory seems to be in agreement with. And maybe decide on debt goals, things you just mentioned about the operating budget and how do we reach this. We could decide there's a cap. We might say we only have so much this year that we're willing to take on, and then work it and say what items have to be borrowed. We started the capital stabilization fund that we'd like to fund with free cash over the next several years. So it may not be available in the next 1 or 2, but maybe that could be down and build it up and be available as a resource in the next 3 to 5 years. And I guess my key message is to try and maintain a flexible outlook. Don't sweat the small stuff in the sense we know there's some issues. It's not horrific, but I think we have a chance to step in right now before we come to any type of crisis in 2 or 3 years. Debt service has been about 4%. This is a big jump. It'll get to about 6%. And the next couple of years will be tough, but I think with some management, we can build a better picture. And then lastly, on the last slide, I just had some debt service examples where someone had wanted to know, like, what if we paid off some articles, what would that impact be? And I just chose 2 items that equal 719,000. If you show the first 10-year impact here, the debt service line item is about $70,000. And if we follow with the advisory line that they've used, about every 13,000 is 1 cent in a tax rate. So that would equate to about 4.5 cents on a tax rate for those 2 items that would total 719,000. And Wendy can chime in more if anyone has questions on the tax rate, because I asked her to be here tonight to help explain any questions on this. But that essentially wraps up my presentation, just to give everyone an update on where we stand and see if we can get some, I'd like to get it more proactive.
Coincidentally, our next agenda item is ARPA funding too, which is another way to help you a little bit.
Yeah.
Thanks for the great work in tactical in this year's bonding and in the long-term bonding issues. Before I recognize Tom, does anyone on the board have any comments they want to make?
No, I would just say thank you, Heidi, for that rundown. It's always good to step back and take a look at the big picture. And I think, as you said, planning, like we got to plan and know what's coming. So
Yeah.
In a year that we know we've got to spend $1 million on a roof, maybe we don't buy a fire truck that year. Like let's spread things out a little bit.
Right.
Together amongst departments and say everybody can't come the same year and say I need.
Yeah.
Let's kind of spread it out amongst departments.
And we've done that with the, again, stealing more of Sean's thunder, with the on-site insight report. So that includes, I was on capital budget for a couple of years. That includes a 5-year outlook. So these school roofs were actually slated for 2 or 3 years ago. So that we've already sort of done that. But with the on-site, that doesn't help with vehicles and things, but with town buildings, we have a condition assessment of each building, and it includes an operating budget and a capital budget by year. So we tried in capital budget committee, which some people may not know is a separate from advisory, although there's one advisory member, that it looks at kind of smoothing it out a little bit. So I recognize Eric first.
Thank you. And so I asked Heidi to give his presentation. So I've been in communication with her quite a bit with the, it started with some of the ARPA stuff. And I know we all have our beliefs. We'll talk about the ARPA stuff, which, who knows if it makes any dent in this. But when I was looking at the ARPA stuff, I looked more at the capital plan, which is a well-vetted, very good capital plan. But there's still, it's interesting. As we discuss ARPA, these things come up that everyone says is so important and has to be done and so on, but it's not in the plan. And I don't know if there's maybe this committee, because it gets a little more public attendance, can do something, as board, can do something to further promote the public involvement with the capital plan, or other departments in it, like the farm pond study issue. That wasn't in our 5-year capital plan, but everyone agrees it's one of the most important things need to be done. So I think really getting everyone's input in that plan, and then working with the finance people like Heidi to see what we can do to smooth it out, and have people then have the capital group decide, okay, or recommend, I should say, this gets moved here, that gets moved there based on that. Do you know what I mean? So that was kind of one of my reasons that I actually asked Heidi to come forward with this, is to kind of get people more knowledgeable about it and knowledgeable about the planning. And I think that, again, the people who pulled together the capital plan did a very good job, but I'm not sure everyone got their input in there. And I don't know if that's public outreach or what it is. And maybe that's what this meeting right now, or maybe we can actually facilitate it through the select board. I know we got a lot of things on our agenda. We don't like to make working meetings, but somehow just get more of that outreach to make sure that, if you want something, you think in the next 5 years that, you got to tell Dan or whoever it is, that you want it on the capital plan. I don't know.
I had one comment on that, but I think Marion's going to make the comment I was going to do. Go ahead, Marion. I'm reading your mind.
Well, probably not. You probably have a better comment than I do, but the ARPA process that we've been following is kind of has brought some of these issues to the fore. Some of the projects that were listed as visionary or new projects in ARPA actually when we think about it and look at the master plan, really should be a long-term capital plan. And I like the idea of widening the capital planning to a broader sort of viewpoint, a more visionary viewpoint for the town. Yeah, that's my comment.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because it is in the plan. It's in the master plan, but the master plan isn't a department. So we actually do budgeting by department. So I think we need to think about budgeting for some other areas. If the master plan needs to be developed, and that's what we've committed to, we need to maybe find a way to include that in the advisory and capital budget process. Anyone else on the select board have a comment? Okay, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heidi, thank you very much for that presentation. As a taxpayer, as a resident, it's very helpful to get our arms around the town budget and how you manage it. My question, and it's great, I really like that you're looking at 8, 10 or more years. My question is, I'm aware, and others here on the call are aware of another category that in the next couple years, and then for about 15 years, could cost the town in today's dollars anywhere from about $7 to $15 million, and maybe more. It's kind of tough to pin down right now, and Sean's on the line here. He can add more to it. And that's the EPA mandate for phosphorus reduction in our MS4 stormwater area. Those are big dollars. Is your financing model starting to incorporate those projections so the town has a way to handle those needs?
No, they're not on the financing model right now, which is one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up. I think we do need to be proactive and start looking at some of the other impacts that could come down. We have looked more only to the 5-year capital items. And this, what you're bringing up, I think is a really good discussion. We have the debt capacity on paper to do this. It's a question of the tax rate. But as far as getting permission to borrow, the town has the bandwidth to borrow 7 million, 10 million. Our budget may not like it. And I think that's a discussion that would be for the select board, and whether they choose to work with the finance director or include me or whatever they want to do to look at the longer term plans of the town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions? All right, thanks again, Heidi. Our next one is the ARPA presentation with Jen Thompson. Do you want to share your screen, Jen? Wherever you are.
Hi, I'm here. Yes, I'll share.
You're good to go.
Thank you. So before I share, I think I'll just do a quick recap. So we met a few months ago now. It's been a few months. We talked a lot about ARPA that evening. We talked about the allowable and the non-allowable uses, and talked about some of the projects that you have already approved. And then the select board set a path forward in terms of how to move forward in selecting the remaining ARPA projects. That involved the company that I work for, CSS, working with your town administrator and your finance director to have department heads and commissions and committees submit proposed projects, and also look at your existing capital plan. So I was joined by both Diane and Deb, and then Dan Sitchell, who's a resident and volunteer, and also I believe serves on both advisory and capital. So over the last few months, we've worked really closely together. I can tell you they've done a phenomenal job. They've been wonderful to work with and extremely helpful. So I thank them because they spent a lot of time on this as well. Like I said, we collected all of the proposed projects. We created a master list. We went through to make sure they were eligible projects. We looked to see what types of alternate funding might be available. And then ultimately, we went as suggested by the select board before advisory and the capital budget committee last week. They reviewed the submissions. There was quite a bit of discussion at that meeting, and then came up with some initial recommendations for the board. So I'll go through those a little bit, and then I think I might pause the chair of advisories on the call. So I certainly don't want to speak on his behalf. So I'll pause after I just kind of introduce what we went through, just to see if he has anything that he would like to add. Does that sound good?
Sure.
So I don't want to waste time going through what you can and can't use opera funds. I think we've covered that in enough of our previous meetings. So I won't waste your time with another lovely PowerPoint. We'll just kind of dig right in, because I think it's really going to be a lot more discussion tonight. So as I mentioned, advisory and capital met last week and reviewed all of those proposed projects, and had some very thought out discussions about some recommendations on how the select board might want to handle selection. So just to recap, Sherborn is scheduled to receive just under 1.3 million in ARPA funds. So far, you have already allocated just under 285,000, which leaves you just over $1 million left that remains to be allocated. So this is the piece I want to talk about first, just as an introduction. When advisory and capital budget met, like I said, there was quite a bit of discussion on the best approach. And ultimately, the committees ended up deciding that they'd like to kind of categorize the projects that were proposed into 5 general areas. And hopefully I've done a well enough job kind of summarizing the titles and descriptions of what those categories are. But the first were projects that had direct impacts in response to the pandemic, those that had a very obvious connection to the pandemic. The second were the projects that were not listed in your capital plan, but are likely inevitable necessary projects, but were unplanned or not, like I said, included in your capital plan. I believe the thought there was that those are projects that will likely have to be done anyway, and should be put together in one kind of category or bucket. The next were those signature legacy projects that we talked about at your last meeting. Those would utilize the one-time funding for those kind of long-lasting projects that would have some sort of a legacy or signature impact on the town. Fourth category is your existing capital projects. Those are ones that you've already seen when you've reviewed your capital improvement plan. And then the final were projects that they felt could probably be funded through other means, or just weren't recommended for various reasons for funding at this time. So before I go into the projects, I'm wondering if you just want to check with the chair of advisory to make sure I haven't left anything off.
He said he wasn't available, but.
Oh, okay, all right.
rather
So
just-
I think I've done a fair enough job for those of you that were there, kind of summarizing what those
Dan
were.
Sickles on. Dan, do you want to add anything?
Hi, everybody. I think Jen did a very nice job of summarizing the big picture of what happened. As Jen said, advisory kind of developed these categories and have a set of projects that I think Jen's going to show you in a minute that are in each of these categories. And I think the hope of advisory is that you might begin to think about making some decisions about how much of ARPA funding to allocate to each of these categories, and then to begin thinking about particular projects. There was also discussion at the advisory meeting, which I think, again, Jan's going to get to shortly, about whether or not it would be helpful to do some kind of community outreach around kind of community preferences on projects. And I guess a last comment that I made is I think a number of these projects are still in a fairly preliminary stage, in the sense of haven't gotten 3 bids, don't have hard numbers. So some of the numbers that you're going to see are still relatively rough numbers. So that's just happy to provide more if more info as needed. But Jen, you did a great job in summarizing what happened at the meeting.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you. So I think I'll hit the outreach part first, just because once we get into these projects, we may get lost in it and I'll forget about that. So advisory did ask, and I think we might have talked about this a little bit in the beginning, what other communities are doing in terms of outreach. And I think I had explained to you before that it really does run the gamut, but I did give some examples. So we've done outreach in some communities that's very robust. We've done some public outreach meetings either in person or via Zoom where folks in the community can weigh in on what they feel the priority should be. And then some communities have elected to do an online survey. It's a pretty short survey that you can, kind of tailor to the needs of your town specifically. And I think you had a few examples in your packet, as well as we sent out some results of another town that did one as well. So that's something we can certainly work with you on if it's something you're interested in. And, we'll get to that a little bit later on, but I didn't want to leave that off. So I'm just going to jump into the actual buckets and the categories of the project. So the first category are those direct impacts, and there's only one thing in there. That's the reserve that we spoke about. I think initially we just threw a number in there of 200,000. It was kind of at the height of some of the Delta variant when we met. I think the board was thinking it might be important to put some money aside, but we didn't really, kind of hit a definitive number. But I think 200,000 was kind of put aside initially. We talked about that quite a bit with advisory, and given that things have slowed down with the pandemic, there was some thought that maybe you could reduce that number. So perhaps to about 10% of your remaining funds, which is just around 100,000. But that's certainly something you can discuss as you decide on which projects and how much you want to put forward. I think there was a really good point made by, I think it was Jeff, your new chair, that this is not just for unanticipated expenses, but also some of the projects that you select, you may end up needing a little bit more money. They may run over budget. Once you start going out to bid for projects, that can sometimes happen. So having that reserve, if you need to kind of reallocate some of your ARPA money is a good idea. I also just want to mention it's not a true reserve. So you're not going to set up any sort of a reserve fund. This is just money that you would not dedicate to another project. You would hold it in case you need it. And then as the ARPA deadline got closer, if you hadn't spent it, you could allocate it for any number of projects that you're considering. So that's the first category. The second category are those necessary projects, the ones that are not included in your existing capital plan, but advisory felt were projects that likely would need to be done and should be considered. So those are the digitizing of your town records. There's a number of departments in town. I've heard a lot about all the paper and records that you have and vulnerability there. So that's a digitizing of town records. I should say, I'm not going to go into too much detail on the projects for a number of reasons. One, I think you're very familiar with a lot of the projects. And also, I think there are a lot of folks on the call that if you did have questions, could likely answer the specifics. The next are the hazardous tree removals. You've talked about that a lot in your previous meeting. The next is there are two requests from the Water and Sewer Commission. One is the water feasibility test and town center and well development. I think you got some background in your packet on that, as well as a wastewater feasibility test for the town center as well. The next one is the Farm Pond Advisory Watershed Plan. There is a little note here because this project was proposed right as you were kind of transitioning in how you handled the ARPA projects. It had actually already gone before advisory, and advisory had recommended it for funding, but it didn't get before the select board because that's when you kind of switched gears and decided you wanted to look at this more holistically and look at all the projects together. So
Jen,
that project,
Jen, while
yep.
you're on that project, can I interrupt a second?
Sure.
Didn't we just get a state earmark for this?
So that is a very good point. So it's approved by the Senate. So it's been approved by the House of Representatives, it's been approved by the Senate. I think it's in committee right now. So you won't know definitively, I don't think, probably for a little while, but it's certainly looking good. We did talk about that in advisory as well, in terms of what if we don't fund it and then it doesn't get funded through the earmark if it ends up falling off the state budget, which can happen. So one of the things you could consider if you felt this was a priority is you could vote it as an ARPA project. And then if the earmark does come through in the fall, we would just simply, by a vote of the select board, remove it as an ARPA project and fund it out of the earmark. So you have some options there if that's something you feel is a priority. The second one,
One reason it could be a priority is due to weather also. I mean, I think it's something that we, Tom Trainer's probably still on here, but they're actively doing a lot of testing at Farm Pond. So we may need to start the project, given that it's summertime and the pond is in, full watershed mode. So
makes sense.
anyway, keep going. I'm sorry to
Oh,
interrupt.
no, that's a great point. And then the final one in this category is the Farm Pond Advisory replacement of the stair system and improving the stormwater conditions. So Jeff, do you want me to stop after, I didn't stop after the first one because it's really just a reserve, but do you want me to stop after each category or kind of roll through all of them and then have a general discussion?
I think that I like the latter plan. Does anyone else on the select board have a preference? I think go through all of them and then we can go back up to one if someone has a question. Is anyone opposed to that? All right, why don't we do
I have
that?
a question
then?
about one of them at some point, so I don't care
Yeah.
what.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
And the capital, I think we're gonna roll through that pretty quickly because you've seen
Yeah.
that before. There's
Yeah,
nothing new there. Okay, so the next section is, as you know, there were some signature legacy projects that were proposed. So there's a signature project group that worked on a town campus transformation. You got some significant background on that as well. That does include $36,000 for ADA compliance and stair work. That was discussed at advisory, so they felt it was an important piece that needed to be spelled out when you're looking at the total. Somewhat related to that, the public library also submitted a request for some landscaping for $35,000, but that is separate from the town campus proposal, but somewhat connected. And then the other signature kind of legacy project is the Recreation Commission had submitted irrigation of Laurel Field for $350,000. So next you move down to your capital projects. I don't think it's necessary to maybe read all of these into the record, but because you've seen them all before, but this is straight from your capital budget plan. It does include things that you just approved at town meeting. And we separated those out for a specific reason. So the ones that are on this list that say approved at town meeting, they were approved for borrowing. So your plan is to borrow for those projects. So clearly, if you made a decision not to, if you made a decision to instead fund them out of ARPA, you would then not move forward with borrowing for those particular capital projects. So these are in it. So we were asked to include fiscal year 23, which are the projects that you just voted at town meeting, fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25. And then we separated out the funded with free cash. So these are capital items that you just funded at your annual town meeting, but those were funded with free cash, so there's no borrowing there. That's a little bit different because if you choose to fund them through ARPA, I'm not sure you would accomplish what you would hope to accomplish in terms of they're already funded out of free cash. Then you'd have to then wait for them to close out to new free cash. So that's a little complicated, but we can talk about that if you need to. But that's why we kind of specifically separated those out so you would know which ones were funded through free cash. And then the final category are projects that advisory felt either could be funded through other means or maybe was not, going to be recommended at this time. So the first were health department laptops. They felt that that was a small enough price tag that could probably be funded out of existing funds or through an end of year transfer. Then there was a health department had put in a request to review and update their Board of Health regulations, have a consultant come in again. They felt this might be able to be handled through other funding sources. The public health administrator, the additional hours due to COVID, you'll recall that you already approved that in some of your, you approved previous time periods in some of your previous ARPA requests. This is to finish out the fiscal year, but it looks like that probably could be handled through an end of year transfer. You wouldn't necessarily have to use ARPA funding for that. The health department also proposed a public health nurse, an actual position, an employee. Advisory did not recommend that at this time because it is a staff position and the ARPA funding, as you know, is one-time funding. So I think the thought there is that, what would you do when the ARPA money ran out? You could then have a new position on the books. Public safety submitted a public safety drone. I think they felt that that was small enough that they may be able to be funded through other sources. Same with the submittals from the Town Forest Committee. They felt portions might be able to be funded through revolving funds or other funding sources. And then the same is true for the upgrade to the town website, which was one of those signature projects that was proposed. And then finally, there was a proposal for the elder housing window replacement that was already funded at town meeting. And also I think there's an earmark for that they expect will be coming through. So ultimately, what advisory had recommended was that the board consider funding some of the projects identified in category 1, which is the reserves, category 2, which are those necessary projects that they feel would have to be paid for anyway, and then 3, those legacy projects, and then not fund the things that were in category 5 for the reasons we just discussed, and also not necessarily fund existing capital projects because they felt that would follow the regular capital budget process, but I'm sure we'll talk about that shortly. So I think that's a pretty decent wrap up to at least kind of get us started on the discussion.
Yeah, and you could probably stop sharing so we can see the full gallery.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, Jen.
You're welcome.
George.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate the rundown, and thank you to advisory for kind of categorizing this. That makes an overwhelming list a little more manageable to take a look at, which I think is very helpful. And I like the way they kind of broke it out. I do think this is, I know maybe Eric doesn't agree with me completely on this. I think it's an opportunity for some of these signature legacy projects that we wouldn't necessarily spend the money on, like the irrigation at Laurel Fields. I really think that's something that could, last year we tried to improve those fields that the town rejected. So now is an opportunity to improve them the way that I think everybody wanted with quality grass fields. And the only way to do that is to have water. So I just want to advocate a little bit for that project. And I know the digitizing of the town records is very important to a lot of people at town hall. And I think that's, and just to modernize everything that we have. So those are just 2 projects that jump out at me that I think we should prioritize.
Eric?
Well, I know if George doesn't support my lower the tax rate thing, then no one will, so. I give up on it. So I am mostly in agreement. I still believe, I'll be like, especially after Heidi's presentation, that there's some opportunity to level something off, or especially something that's been approved. Like, for example, I was thinking of a couple of legacy projects, and then maybe a something frankly off that's been approved off the last town meeting. The town meeting voted on it. The entire town voted on it for the bond. The kind of easy pickings. You could just go and pick a few of those, so it's townwide approved, and it's not just a small number of people making the vote for it, and some kind of split like that. Personally, I like the digitizing the records. I question the 350. And that was my one question, is how that cost came up with, because I've been involved with scanning city records and town records and city records in my day job, and I haven't seen it, quite. I'd be surprised if it's that high. I'd be surprised. It'd be interesting if we break it up, do the more necessary boards or people who desperately need it. Like I was thinking, do the ones that affect the average resident, like zoning, Board of Health, and someone from the Cemetery Commission said that they needed, scanned records, something along those lines. My second thing is I find the irrigation of the fields interesting. It's what do you call it? It wouldn't be on the 5-year plan because it probably was never even conceived of until they couldn't do the artificial turf. And I think it'll kind of meet the goal of some of the people, who didn't want the turf, and that'll improve it because a lot of people talked about, why don't you just improve the grass you have? And I find it at least interesting. I don't know where we are in that, like how good that number is, but I think both those I find interesting. That's all.
Dave Goldberg's on here, so I don't know if he has a chance that he could comment on the numbers on that irrigation, just so we have a better idea.
Maybe the irrigation and the scanning, I'd be interested in hearing about.
Let's go through the select board first, and then we'll
Okay.
recognize people at large. So, and so I'll put my pet peeve out there, which is I'm a big fan of the town center campus one, 135,000 for that, because the library, believe it or not, will be completed this fall. You heard it here first, and I think having the campus be more integrated is going to be able to showcase that. So, and that actually. Sam Nelson is on here. That actually has a very well-defined budget, including bids already on it. So it's not a hypothetical number. So I would really encourage us to do that because it's going to be a real showcase to the town. And then Sean's made a chat here. The trees, we took the trees out of the operating budget because we said we were the $150,000 for tree removal was originally going to be in the operating budget, and we said we would use ARPA funding. So we removed that originally from the budget that was submitted for the DPW. So final thing I'd like to say is a lot of these other ones, like you mentioned, I think I'm a really big fan of the irrigation one. I think it's more than irrigation because either it's dry or then it's really muddy and wet. So it's also drainage and all of the above. But I think that would be great to have a natural grass field, and we can elaborate on that in a minute if we want to, and the town records as well. So I concur with the other comments. Marion, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'll just weigh in and give you my votes. I agree with the digitizing of town records. Absolutely. I think that number sounds really high. So there may be some savings there. As far as hazardous tree removal, I actually questioned taking that out of the operating budget of the town because that's going to be a recurring problem every year. If we put 150,000 toward it this year, we're going to need another 150,000 next year. It's the sort of ongoing expense that I think should be built into our budget somewhere, but it really doesn't belong as an ARPA project in my view. The farm.
Well, we took it out though. We chose to take it out of the
I
operating
know.
budget.
I think
So
I
don't disagree with you. And we budget trees annually, but not at that high a level. This is an extraordinarily high level. We took funds out of the stabilization fund, whatever it was, 2 or 3 years ago, to handle another $150,000 for trees. So
right, but given the backlog of trees that are about to fall on the roads, this is an ongoing problem.
I think Sean's clapping for you. I don't know if he's raising his hand or clapping for you. You can talk. You want to say anything on that specific subject, Sean?
Well, 2 things. One, that ship sailed. You're not going to supplement my operating budget for fiscal 23 with 150,000, but you kind of already made that deal for me. And secondly, I don't expect that we should spend 150 every year. We won't have any roadside trees if we keep spending the money we're spending. So we're trying to catch the other end of this curve and hope that we don't have another massive die off, but there's significantly less old growth trees than we had 5 years ago. So
that's true.
We're hoping this is one of the last few hits, and then the operating budget should carry it if we can get to a steady state.
Yeah,
but you don't have much of a choice, because if I don't get this, I need an earmark, or we're going to deplete. This would knock the reserve fund in half if we end up needing to use it.
Sean, I didn't mean to say that you don't need the money. I just wasn't sure if this was the right source, but you need the money. I totally agree. And when we can talk about that some more. The farm pond projects, I think, are really important, because farm pond is kind of on the brink of not being able to maintain its quality. And that would be a major blow to the town. That is a legacy project, if you like. I also like the town campus transformation, because it's not a huge amount of money, and they've put out one of the better vetted budgets, and it could have knock-on effects in values around the town. Our town center is not our strong suit. It's not a particularly attractive or captivating town center. We love it for what it is, but it really could be better, and it would give the town a better face, which may have property value implications. I don't know. The water and sewer feasibility tests, in principle, I'm very concerned that we pursue that sooner or later, but I'm not sure that we've made the basic decisions yet to throw money at it quite yet. And I appreciate Eric's comment at advisory. Actually, he commented that if we know what we're going to do about the town center water and or sewer, we should decide we're going to do and then raise the money to do it. Because we've had many studies over the years. We still don't know exactly where the best well site is. And we don't know where the best, whether the installation of town water or the installation of a step type sewage treatment system in town center are the higher of the two priorities, water or sewer. We haven't really made that decision yet. So I don't think we're quite ready to decide to do something on that. So that's the end of my, the Recreation Commission. We basically asked the Recreation Commission to do natural irrigation of Laurel Fields with our vote at town meeting last year. And I think if we can support them doing what we asked them to do and do a natural field, that would be great. But I think all the projects I like already add up to more than $1 million.
And actually, oh, no, mind. Thanks.
Go ahead, Eric. Go ahead.
Just very quick. I'm sorry. I see Jen has her hand raised. Just one of the options. One thing that might come out of this meeting might not be a vote of like the 3 items, maybe a short list, like bring this down to like 7 items or whatever it is. If we can kind of resolve on that, that might be, this might be an iterative process.
I think that's true because of what I said earlier, that a number of them, like you mentioned about the documentation, digitization, is that the costs aren't very well defined yet. So it's sort of hard to tell that, you know, what they may scope could include. Jen, you want to add something?
And can I make one more quick comment before Jen?
Sure.
And one thing we've discussed is, I mean, do we want to have a public forum on this?
Yeah.
You know, we have all our ideas. Do we want to ask the public where they all stand on it? Like, we may all think these are the great projects and the public may be overwhelmingly in another direction.
It's hard though. I'm not necessarily enamored with it, because how are you going to compare, you know, a town center campus versus a new fire truck or whatever? I mean, it's pretty hard to do, I think. With
one way to look at that is that these have all been public meetings.
Yeah,
right. That's true.
They've all been advertised. And looking at the surveys that Jen gave us as samples, I just didn't think they looked that useful, honestly. I mean, the Pepperell survey that she gave us the outcomes of, it was nicely done, but none of the answers were significant.
Yeah, that's what I felt too.
The numbers just were not.
They all were, you know, same band.
Jen, can you share your screen again? I can't seem to pull up this proposed, what you showed, and I'd just like to see the page that has the proposed, that first page of proposals with the necessary product, you know, that 1 through 3 pretty much.
Sure. While I'm pulling that up, I should say too, the other point on the surveys, because I agree, I think there's strengths and weaknesses to the surveys, is you really don't get a lot of people to it when you compare it to your population or even the number of people that vote in your community. Then the numbers pretty across the board are low. Yeah. You know,
can you scroll down to that a little bit further? There you go. I want to see the number 2 and number 3s.
Okay. And the reason that I did raise my hand is someone had commented in the chat, I think someone from the Energy and Sustainability Committee, about the 2 solar projects. So those, I think you received some background information on those, and I meant to mention it at the end of my list here. So that was not discussed at advisory because I think it might have come in the same day. So we didn't see it until the day after, but it's certainly worth looking at and something you discuss. And I can screen share it, but I think Mr. Lesser's on the call if people have questions on this process as well.
Okay. Paul has his hand up.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. Since all the other board members have commented, I thought I would make some comments on these projects. The first comment is that I understood that we promised 150,000 of ARPA funds in order to solve the budget problem and take 150 off the table. And I think we should stick by our commitments. If we make a commitment, we should stick by it. So I don't see that that's even negotiable. We said we we're going to do 150. I'm going to support the 150. I think all of us should stand by what we said at the time we made that deal. Second point is that I don't support projects that are looking at water and sewer for the downtown center at this point because of the nearby 40B, the litigation we have and so on. We run a huge risk of finding solutions that would allow unwanted development to take advantage and to upset our thinking and our plans for our community. It's too big a risk. So I would not at this point spend money on that and let that litigation go forward a bit and work on trying to find other ways to meet our housing obligations, but not by either of those two water sewer projects at this point. So I would not support that. The notion of irrigation, I believe we owe it to the athletics of our schools and of our citizens to have playing fields. The whole point, I think, of the past debate we had about whether or not this should be artificial turf or not seems to have resolved that question, that we should have good athletic fields naturally. And if that's where we're going to go, then we need to back it with money. But I do know that as part of the presentation by the Recreation Commission for the artificial turf fields, that they had a variety of other funding sources. So it's worth exploring whether or not they still have some plans for other funding sources. And if so, how much are their donations and whatever, and what are the actual costs before we commit. But I'm leaning strongly in favor of the irrigation part as a debt we owe. I'm mindful of the fact that I read an article that mental health advisors say that those children who grow up with athletics do much better in life than those children who grow up without athletics. I think we owe it to our children. I think that's all I really want to say at this point. I think there's a lot of merit to the integration of the town hall campus, but I want to see more. I actually haven't seen the plan or the quotations. I'd like to be able to see that stuff before I commit on that. That's where I'm at now.
Okay, thanks, Paul. George, you had one more
Yeah, I
comment?
just to kind of summarize what kind of our whole board had said, I've wrote down some numbers and some things here. With trees, that's 100, according to the numbers on there. I think we need to vet some of these numbers and maybe we can come down, but trees are 150, irrigation's 350, digitizing's 350, the town center's 135, and the farm pond number, not including the watershed, because I'm hoping that's the earmark, the 110 to do the stairs and the drainage, those total $1,095,000.
Right on target.
Over where we would need to be, but I think some of these numbers, as I said, the digitizing seems very high at 350. I think if we, move some of these numbers, there's a potential we could get. I mean, those seem to be the top things that we all just discussed. So I think we need to explore those a little further. I just wanted to summarize that. I'd like to hear more from like Sean and Michael and Dave Goldberg as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's great. Paul, is your hand still up or you have another point?
No, let me take it down. Sorry.
All right, I'll do the remainder in the order that I saw them. Sean, do you want to go next?
Yeah, and this is actually, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
In reference to a couple, the irrigation partially, but definitely the digitizing the records. That's an item, no one was ever in charge of that. You know, and that, so there's a reason that never made the 5-year capital plan, the 20-year capital plan. That's, if there's anything that's ever been cross-functional, it's that, right? That's Board of Health, that's Concom, that's, you know, it's a lot of different boards, committees, and jurisdictions. So there was never a point person for it. But because of the move, one, it's very timely that we start to move on that, because as we bring in the new storage in the town hall and we start moving storage cabinets around, it's going to be very disruptive if we're not moving on that. So I don't know exactly what it's going to cost, but no one was ever tasked with go figure out what it's going to cost. We know we need to do it. We know there's going to be an ongoing cost of having digital records, but there's a huge cost in not having it. So I would look to this board to take a leadership role and at least just address it in a form of committing to it and asking some people to work on it, whether it be you know, Addie Mae's done a lot of work, but we didn't actually quantify what it was going to take. So it was a best guess. And to that point, I would also say that, you know, Recreation was tasked. They basically tasked themselves with coming back with something. They didn't have any money to spend on how to figure out what the something is. So it, rather than a hard no, I'm certain they're not going to get a hard yes tonight on 350,000, but I would suggest that they walk away with some kind of direction, either to come back or the partial for a feasibility study to get moving. Because the worst thing we can do is not make a decision because we say we don't have data, but not give someone the resources to get the data. That's all for now.
Okay, thanks.
And you need to fund the trees, sorry.
You know, that'll make more paper too, once we have those trees that we can only need to digitize.
Exactly, but that's much more to shred.
Michael Lesser.
Okay, Michael Lesser, 54 Forest Street, as a resident, I'm speaking. I'll give a few general points. As a member of the public, I will say that I actually would like to see a significant portion of this money go to lowering my taxes and to go to projects that have already gone through, because I actually feel like going through the funding things that have gone through the formal process of being vetted by the town and all the other reviews and votes, that I think it's important to fund that those projects are well vetted. And I would like to see that we use some proportion to lower the taxes, even though I was more on Eric's side about this kind of thing, but I could see it's certainly less sexy than doing all the other kind of things that you guys have been looking at there, even though I see digitizing as a strange one because it doesn't fall into a capital project in some ways, although you could certainly turn it into one. And I think it is certainly needed. So that's sort of general things as a public as to where I think the money should go. And also that goes hand in hand with a broader view, as I think Heidi said and others, that as to what's capital budgeting and what's included. I'll switch gears. I will, as to projects, I like the Laurel Fields myself, and I feel that's sort of part of something that the town has given the signal about, so that I feel it's in a sort of a mid area between the town liking something and having, in a sense, spoken with its votes about doing more there. What I would like to think is, though, that a lot of these projects, as you're going to do a short list, will need refining. And I think the Laurel Fields, I can't tell the Laurel Fields project, as Jeff said, is not just an irrigation project. it's some sort of natural restoration project, so that we have a better sense of that we're pairing irrigation with other activities to improve the quality of the soils and everything else like that. I don't know how much it would, I don't know that, and I know they've done some work on, I remember from past presentations about that I think we should sort of broaden the scope of it to make sure that, and recognize the fact that what we've been warned about is using ARPA money for things that have ongoing maintenance, ongoing operating costs that we haven't committed to. But I think but we have to recognize that doing something at Laurel Fields, whether it's irrigation or the broader, just a whole plan of what we do to restore the soils and make sure we have appropriate watering, that we have to recognize that it will be require ongoing costs. But which we've been warned against, but I like the fact, but I'd like it to see it being a more broader defined activity there. I guess I have some others, but I'll just make one more thing before I come back and maybe raise my hand again on the solar projects that came in late. There are 2 solar projects that we did some financial analysis of and sent in to everybody about a week or so ago, because we couldn't find conventional ways to finance them. One's a small project on at the transfer station. It's probably $35,000. And it's generates significant income if you look at the avoided cost of purchasing electricity as we do it now. So it has a good return. And thank you for putting that, maybe 40,000, we're being a little higher there. And I'll put that project out different because we can actually go out to bid more easily and do that quickly. So that's a project that maybe, even though it has revenue, and there's financial analyses in the subsequent pages of this, but that's a project that could be done fairly quickly and start generating revenues. And it's not a lot of money, but it wouldn't have to wait till the next town meeting to do that. And we could do the procurement fairly quickly because of it's under $50,000. The main fire station has another project, but we'd have to go check on how to procure that one, do the procurement. But that also has quite a reasonable return. But maybe that could be folded into, that might take longer procurement, maybe be folded into some sort of bonding effort, since it does generate revenue in terms of avoided costs. So I just want to put those 2 things in front of you and maybe think of them separately. Where the
Michael, one question on the for the Energy Committee on those 2. Is there any, can you talk with the sustainability coordinator about grants for those? Is there any opportunities there?
No, there's no grants for PV projects. They're attractive financial projects, and therefore it's expected that you fund them.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, no, it's always a question to ask. But yeah, so I would suggest considering them, and especially even the smaller one, because that might accelerate a project that has a good return. I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
Okay, Dave Goldberg.
Thanks.
Sorry to make you wait so long.
No, it's fine. I think there were a lot of things that were hit on, and I'm going to do my best to try and just comment on a few things that I heard. I wish I could say that the fundings that we had for the artificial turf, the individuals that were going to pony up money, which are still willing to do for the natural turf. But I don't believe that that's going to be the case. So it would be great if we could find private money. And certainly if anyone on the call wants to write a check, we're happy to take it. But so I think that we're really looking at this as an opportunity to step outside of what our master plan, our 5-year plan is, and take advantage of the fact that we can do something special over there at Laurel. The topic of the costs were brought up. So just to kind of lay out, there's 3 significant pieces to this project. One is actually putting the sprinklers into the ground, running the lines and doing the repairs to the fields in order to accomplish that. And we've heard from a couple of different sources that that's probably about $20,000 per acre. We have about 10 acres over there at Laurel. So you're talking specifically just to run all the pipes and so forth, about 200,000. The other, and again, I think those numbers are relatively accurate. The big unknowns are the other 2 things. The first being, we don't have power over there at Laurel today. There is power that runs out on the street. We would need to somehow figure out how to bring power into Laurel. I don't at this point have a really good number for that. I've seen some estimates of other irrigation systems that was around 30,000, but they already had a pole there. So we may have to bring in a pole, talk to Eversource, whatever it is that needs to back that up. So at this point, that's kind of an unknown cost. And the other is the water source itself, whether or not we think about a well there, or whether or not we look at something like trying to capture groundwater and store it in tanks on site that we can then use later on to irrigate. At this point, we don't know which direction we go, and I don't have a great sense for what the cost of those would be either. So that 20,000 per acre estimate assume like town water, right? Like you already had a water source. So to Sean's comment, I mean, I'm happy to, and I don't know the process for kind of peeling off some of the money and potentially doing a study and trying to get more concrete numbers for the committee and come back and say, this is actually what it would cost if we went forward with this project. And if that makes everyone feel more comfortable to say, yeah, we can approve this because we know, okay, that whatever number the Recreation Commission is coming up with is pretty close to what the final costs are going to be. As far as ongoing costs, I think we could probably absorb that when we think about, whatever ongoing maintenance there is for the actual irrigation system. I'm not as concerned about burdening the town with any ongoing costs. I think we could cover that in our own budget. And this was just, there's probably smarter people on the phone than me in terms of how this affects the phosphorus reduction project. In a quick conversation with Sean, there's a potential for us to capture some water runoff and spread it out over the fields. And so there's and that could be part of the study that we do, which is if we did put irrigation into Laurel, does that actually help us with the phosphorus offset that we have to accomplish as a town? So it may actually help prevent a future expense if we're able to tie that into that project.
That's a great point.
Thanks, Dave.
Anything else?
Yep.
One of the things I'm probably going to say at the end, and what affects you too, Dave, is we may need to approve some funds for people to develop more rigorous scoping estimates. So we may, just like we do with complete streets, the way that works is the town pays for the design and then the state pays for the work. So we may have to decide if we want to allocate some funding now to have each of some of the projects George mentioned, and maybe a few others do a little bit more rigorous analysis of the cost so that we have a better handle on it. George, do you have another point?
Yeah, just one more quick thing on that, not on the irrigation, because Dave, I think, is going to address that, and that we talked about that and the digitizing, like getting into the costs on that. One other, I think the town center, the town campus project has been pretty well vetted, and probably that price seems more steady, but the farm pond number of the 110 for the stair and the stormwater management, do you know if that has been studied? Do you know who's in charge of that one? I think we just need to assign these projects that I think we're interested in getting more information. So
I don't see her on her, but Melinda O'Neill from Friends of Farm Pond has been sort of.
Yeah, she's on Farm Pond Advisory, isn't she?
Yeah, whatever you call it. Yeah.
Her and Catherine Rocchio, probably.
I don't see them on the call tonight, but yes, exactly. So I'll call them and let them know if they haven't heard it. But I think that's a good point.
I think Roger,
Jimmy Guthrie's
might be trying to raise his hand, and I think Jeannie might be trying to raise her hand.
No, Jeannie's just clapping because she likes us paying attention to Farm Pond.
Okay.
Am I right, Jeannie? So I think
no, I hit the wrong button.
All right.
I think with the actual the water plan, we did get a fairly good quote from a Ken Wagner, who laid it out pretty definite of what the cost would be. The staircase, the new stairs going down, I think the cost of that might be more because we need drainage and to take into account for stormwater issues also. Sean's, he's got his hand raised and he might help with that one also.
I can add to that if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, they do have a price for what they were looking at for the stairs. There's, you can keep escalating on Farm Pond. It's kind of anyone's guess how much money we could spend on drainage at Farm Pond. It also depends on whether or not we get phosphorus reduction credits at Farm Pond. So that's a different decision later. So the project, they could fund a project that would make a huge improvement. We could also fund improvements to that project with phosphorus reduction money if we so chose. Again, those are other decisions to be made later, but certainly almost the worst case is the way it is right now, where water goes ripping down the walkway and heads right for the pond and takes all the sand with it. And now we can't even have sand sculpture contests because there's no sand left. So there's definitely huge improvements that can be made with that money. And I believe they had firm numbers for it.
Thanks, Sean. Addie Bay? I think you're muted.
Yeah, I just was gonna throw in, I was trying to find the exact amount that Farm Pond was working on, but I know the Friends, Melinda they had several things they were trying to deal with, the erosion, and they were trying to deal with the, there were a couple of things that were part of it. I know one of it was just this, I forget what it's called, but it's a report and study, and that needed to be done like sooner rather than later. And I don't think that part was a high dollar amount, but it'd be, it's one of those, getting the work done was technically difficult and needed funding in order to go forward with any of these other projects. So I'm trying to find the name of it, so I'll get off.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, my take on all of this, and I want to get the board's input on this, is what if we don't approve anything tonight, but we ask the categories that George picked out? I think it was primarily category 2 and 3, or box 2 and 3. Ask each of them to come back. We're meeting next week. That's probably too soon, but ask them to come back with, they won't have fully baked numbers, but a little bit harder look at the estimates that they have, including ways in which we can possibly phase some of these projects. So we might be able to get a little more done and then, phase some of it in, because we have that 200,000, remember, we kept as reserve. So if we phase it in, maybe a second phase of some of these could come from that 200,000, or it could be entirely new projects that we're keeping in reserve.
So Jeff, let me just run through those projects again. I know Roger Demler also, I think, wants to speak. I think he was waving instead of raising his hand, but.
Oh, I didn't see him. Yeah.
Let me just.
Where I give you, well, I'll recognize you in a minute, Roger.
Yep. Okay. So
you're done, right, Addie? Addie, you're done?
With Sean's already done the 150. I don't think we need any more information on that.
Correct.
That's on Dave Goldberg. He's gonna kind of work on that number. The digitizing, who is in charge of coming up with a better plan, or kind of digging into the numbers on that?
Well, Sean and Addie may have been working on it. I know a little bit.
Yeah, we can get the.
So I guess I missed, but we've got, I guess I have all of the land use, and the only ones I don't have is, I don't know what the finance department had, but I worked with Iron Mountain to figure out what would it cost. And then I'd given Diane the numbers of, I know they're ballpark, because if we start digitizing, we might go through and find that some things are duplicate. So it might be a few pages less here and there, but it was pretty accurate, other than not knowing.
Do you think the 350 is an accurate cost then, Addie?
No, well, I don't know. I don't know what the town clerk has, but at least the 100, and I think, like I said, I gave Diane at the beginning of the week the numbers.
One thing we're going to need to look at, I talked to Sean about this today, I think, is that, right now we have files by department. So the Board of Health has files, the Zoning Board of Appeals has files, planning board has files. It turns out, like when we had the Fields of Sherborn project, that they all have the same records for the Fields of Sherborn. So one idea is to go to files by property, and then
Mhm.
each department can access that, whatever that property is, and see it. Right now, I think we have a lot of duplication from what
Yep.
I've seen.
And one of the challenges is going to be, though, as you start, I mean, right now, the numbers that I have are for based on what Board of Health has currently, what Conservation has currently,
Yeah.
what Planning Board has currently, what Building Department has currently. Unless you were going to have everybody sit down and go through the files before they started digitizing,
Yes.
I don't think you could know for sure where, eliminate all the duplicates.
I know. Eric has
We're
ideas.
just trying to get to, Eddie, what I said was the number, the 5 projects that we kind of identified tonight total $1,095,000. We have $1,010,000. So
Yeah.
we have to
Okay,
find a
so-
way to either take one of them out or reduce
Well,
some of these projects.
I
So
think
that
I
was,
would I agree with George, and I would suggest here is rather than trying to estimate the quantity, Eric has a lot of experience in this in Framingham, is maybe talk to 1 or 2 towns that have already digitized and see how they went about it. Because I think it isn't so much about quantifying. how many-
Framingham hired a whole department and had a dedicated group
Yeah.
just for, and spent well over a year just digitizing records. Because then when we were looking at large format and trying to figure out if we could start scanning things in, it's very time consuming. And I'm but as a starting point, you could say, do the fire, the land use. I mean, basically everything, I had everything except for the finance department. We could probably get a good, it's by the box, you look at the file cabinets and it's each drawer is a box and a half, and there was a price that they gave us per, I think we have about as accurate, and why can't I find my email where it's laid out exactly where we were totaled.
Steven Side just sent it.
Yeah, he just put
175,000.
That's excluding basically the financial departments.
okay.
Yeah, that's just the land use, basically.
And maybe
So
I think that excluded town clerk too.
Yeah.
How about
So
they
it-
direct us to come back with another number in the next meeting or so?
Okay.
Yeah.
A commitment from you guys that it's probably going to happen, and we'll tighten up the number and how we're going to accomplish it.
Great. And maybe work with Jackie. I see Jackie just made a comment asking, do you know if there's any grants out there for digitizing?
No, almost positive of it. I would have found it before, to be honest with you. What you said, Eddie, is partially true about Framingham's effort. It actually, there are many departments that do many different methods and stuff like that. And I have a lot of thoughts on it if you want to just wrap me into your things. Like, for example, I actually think you can almost not do Concom's files. Because Concom's files, order conditions, and certificates of completion, they're recording the register of deeds against the property anyway. They're already scanned in and available online in the South Middlesex Registry of Deeds. That's how I find them. And so, certain efficacies I think you could have from there.
Okay.
Are you saying we shred Concom's files?
I am not.
Okay.
Courtney
So we
just
store the paper
did her
copies?
tongue.
And that's an interesting thing. So you have to basically petition the the state, I'm gonna use the wrong name, the state holder of records or public records, to actually shred anything pretty much, unless it automatically self-expires. And some of the things that we looked in the engineering department of Framingham, even if you digitize it, you cannot shred it. There are currently no provisions to actually do certain amounts of shredding. You basically have to like Iron Mountain it or store it in a top shelf down at DPW.
Yeah, that's.
Hey, Jeff, can you recognize Roger? I think he's been waiting longer than anybody.
Yeah, where are you, Roger? You're hiding.
I'm here. Yeah.
Go ahead. You want to talk?
Yeah. Yes, please. When I found out about this opportunity, sort of like the day before Diane needed it, I put together a couple of propositions for testing the town well and the town septic system field. And since then, we've had meetings with the planning board, the health department, some of the people in the health department, the select board now, and people on the select board, the sustainability committee. And I realized that the Water Commission and a lot of volunteers have been worried about what happens to downtown water and sewer for at least 15 or 20 years. In fact, quite a few people on this page tonight have been involved in that. And we've got very cool reception from the people that should be concerned about this. It's not the Water Commission's position to decide what to do. It's the responsibility of the planning board that has spent a lot of time talking about the value of doing something about water and sewer for the town center in particular. The Board of Health has concerns about the long-term viability of the quality of the water downtown. Of course, the selectmen should be worried about the long-term viability of the tax base downtown. The sustainability people actually voted not to consider this as part of their charter, but sustainability of the town seems to be a very important thing to me. I don't know where to go from here. It's these other organizations that have to decide what their priorities are. And right now I can say town water and sewer is not on their list. I think that's a really bad thing. What I could suggest is that in the short term, we might invest some more in updating the estimates we've got and looking into consequences of PFAS and things like that, and put Peter Newton, our long-term consultant in this area, put him back on the payroll for a while and dig into the details. But short of that, it's up to other people to decide what to do here, not us. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. And as the new chair of the select board, I'm going to recognize the new chair of the Board of Health, Matt Vitale.
Perfect. I think the only comment I wanted to make is we sort of started saying, I think having a single place where people could look up the totality of records for their home or property is really appealing. And so I would caution against saying, you know, we have this set of records that is held by the state or in some other venue. I think if we're sort of going to do this, the more we think about that end user experience and how to make it robust and comprehensive, the better it will go, so that whether it's a property owner or somebody who wants to look into a property that they're considering purchasing, or a developer or somebody else could transparently see the circumstances across the board without needing to know this chunk is in the repository and this chunk is in a separate location. But again, I would just echo I think you guys have been really thoughtful about this. I think on the Board of Health side, the digital plans make it so much easier to consume, to discuss, and to consider. And I think the more we can make that accessible to homeowners or applicants, the better we'll do for them.
Thanks, Matt. Daryl, you haven't spoken yet either. Then I'll circle back with people who have already spoken once.
Okay, I'm going to quickly share my screen. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to speak, but since there was a comment made about Board of Health concerns, and the Board of Health hasn't had a chance to discuss this formally. So, but what I did, I was concerned when I heard, okay, what's the deteriorating condition in downtown? So I've downloaded data from the Mass DEP public water supply website. There were close to 13,000 test results for all sorts of parameters for the PWSs, which happen to be all but the exception of the fields in downtown.
Public water supplies, tell them.
Yes, oh yes, thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's good. I chose nitrates because it's most indicative of septic. There are also fertilization and impervious surface can have some bearing on nitrates, but it's a good indicator. The data runs from 1993 to, I think, April 2022. And you can see that it's fairly consistent over those years. And I would even suggest, you know, there's some improvement, a slight drop here. Not quite sure what's going on with Sherborn Crossing, but it was lower in the past. It also wasn't used very much, and it wasn't tested throughout that entire period because it was inactive for a number of years. So anyway, so this is one question is, and the limit for nitrates is 10. So we will find nitrates probably throughout most of the town because we have septic systems. So that's one thing. I don't know the levels elsewhere in the town, but we will know that soon from another project that Groundwater Protection Committee has arranged with another group. So one question is there something imminent about to happen? It's looking fairly steady right now. And we've also had improvements and upgrades to septic systems downtown. So that's kind of one point, what might be the driver. The other concern is that I'm not sure that moving a mile away from the downtown is going to see remarkably different water quality. One of the concerns raised about the downtown are the PFAS results that have been seen. But that's because the PWSs have just recently been required to test for PFAS. Homeowners have been doing some testing for PFAS. They are fairly ubiquitous. Medfield to the south has roughly the same levels that we're seeing in the downtown. I checked Natick and Wellesley for their public water supply records also to see what might be towards the Morse Road or even the Farm Pond areas. And Morse's Pond in Wellesley, there are wells both for Natick and Wellesley that are near that pond. And those levels are in the high 80s part per trillion of PFAS, with the standard being 20. And unclear which direction that might be flowing, but it's not necessarily going to be better to just move the well somewhere else. I think what the Board of Health works a lot on is prevention. That's why we spend so much time regulating septic systems and evaluating that. And also in terms, there's a bit of VOCs downtown, fairly limited, but they are present. But Elm Bank, of all places, the wells there have not extraordinary levels, but certainly elevated levels of VOCs. And that's not terribly far away either.
Kara, I think this is probably enough detail for us, though. We're really not going into individual projects.
No, that's basically all I wanted to say, since it was mentioned. I wouldn't have said anything, but it was mentioned that the Board of Health had concerns about the long-term health. I can't say that now because I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, so I'm only presenting as an individual, but at this moment. So,
okay. So I think we want to wrap this up pretty quickly here. There's 3 people with their hands raised. Do you have something else to say, Addie Mae? We don't need additional detail on the project.
Sorry, I need to put my hand down.
And Dave, do you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just George was enumerating the projects and asking about clarifying the numbers, and I didn't know, like, because I had floated the idea of, and as had you, of actually funding a study. So I was trying to clarify as George was going through, are we talking about coming back with a number for the cost of the study? Or are we talking about trying to solidify the numbers for the actual project itself? So I was more just a point of clarification as he was going through.
I think both, Dave. I think we want to see a cost to study to find out how much it's going to cost. Like, we're not going to approve anything tonight, as Jeff said. It's just, I think we've made it clear. I think as a board, we're pretty much in agreement on the projects we want to focus on, and the irrigation is one, but we just want to get, and it may take a study in order to get a clarification of what that's going to cost, because we can't approve it until we have a better idea of what the total cost is.
But George,
I can go ahead, Paul.
Just a reaction to that I don't think we need to fund things that are going to be perfect and permanent. That is, it may very well be with regard to irrigation or or digitalization or anything else, that we make a start, and maybe we do digitize land use and just fund that rather than this idea that we have to do the whole project and do everything and it has to be perfect.
Right, that's a good point, Paul. I think digitizing is a lot different than the irrigation because you have to do a whole irrigation project. You can't partially irrigate or partially install an irrigation. So that one, I think in particular, we need to get a better idea of what the total cost is going to be.
Well, you could argue though that, I mean, turf field was only originally going to be 3 or 4 fields. So, you know, we don't have to, you know, necessarily irrigate all of Laurel Field. It could be targeted areas. We're not going to get into that. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that every one.
Like you said, Jeff, I think we've done a good job of narrowing it down tonight. I think we need to wrap it up and move on.
That's what I think too. So Michael, do you have something quick you want to say?
Well, I actually just wanted to clarify which projects you are going forward and hopefully not forgetting to keep in your tally the idea of lowering taxes as well as that reserve quantity for things. What Paul said.
You've already made that.
5-member board, the 5 projects we're discussing at this point are trees for 150,000, irrigation for 350, digitizing for 350, the town campus project for 135,000, and farm pond, stormwater and stairs for 110. Those were really the ones that we had focused on. And anybody on the board can correct me if I'm wrong, but those 5 seem to be the 5 that the 5 of us were all really interested in exploring further.
Well, can I add to that? I was persuaded by what Michael Lesser said about the solar projects. For a little bit of seed money, like $35,000, if we get a return on that over 5 years, 10 years, we'll make that money back, and it's going to improve the environment. It seems to me like a no-brainer.
Yeah,
makes sense.
So I'd like to.
So I would add. I mean, just because the solar projects weren't on that initial presentation, I think you're right. Michael, you did make a good argument for those, and I think as we should probably keep those on the list as well to continue to explore as the solar projects.
Yeah, makes sense. Marion, do you have a?
No, I agree with that. I didn't get the solar projects in my emails, so
I didn't either.
I really,
it was all new to me tonight, to be quite honest.
I sent it to Eric, and I guess I sent it to the chairs of each department, and I guess maybe it didn't get distributed, but I sent it to Diane, Eric, and Stephen. So I guess.
Last comment concerning the digitizing project. I built into whoever presents that. First of all, I have 2 concerns about it. One is somebody's got to be in charge. It sounds very dispersed still to me.
Mm-hmm.
And second, you need to get some database expertise in there.
Yeah, there's vendors that do this regularly, Iron Mountain and others.
Iron Mountain, yeah.
Okay, good. So just, but make sure the buck stops somewhere on that project because it's not clear who that is yet.
Right. And I feel like Addie and Sean are kind of spearheading it on our end to get an idea of what we need on that.
For IT, we were creating an IT separate budget this year also too. So it may fall under that, All right. I think we beat that one to death pretty well. I guess I'd say. I think we should. I don't think we'll be ready in a week because I think we should do it at whatever the next meeting is after the 6th. Our next meeting is actually only a week away on the 16th. So I think we should give people longer than a week to compare these estimates. So I would look to have those people that are representing the projects that George mentioned, including the solar one, available probably 2 weeks after the 16th, but I'm not sure. We'll have to firm up the exact date, but probably
June 30th, I think is the meeting.
Something like that, yeah. So thank you, everybody, for turning up and providing great input, and Jen for organizing it. So we're going to go on now to appointment to various boards and committees. Now, Diane, do you want me to share that list, or do you want to just read the names to us?
I don't know what the board wants to do. I suppose you could share the list of all the applications that came in. But the board tonight just needs to review them.
Are we deciding on them tonight?
No, all this is coming back to you on the 16th for appointment. Part of the new process was the board wanted to review all of the applications that came in before any appointments were made. So
Okay.
tonight is to just look at the applications that came in, because we do have some new applicants.
Yep.
And then on the 16th next week, I will have all the people that have applied actually come to the meeting in case there are any questions. Tonight was just to review what has actually come in. And this is according to the new plan that was set up and approved by the select board back in September.
Yep.
Right.
That makes sense to
Diane,
me.
could we get a consolidated list of?
Yes,
the-
I have one in my files, and I'll email it out tomorrow.
Wasn't
I
that,
just-
that attachment that we got, didn't that include all the names?
Well, these are all the applications, but I actually have a condensed list that I was going to bring forward to the 16th that I
Oh.
finished today.
Okay.
Okay.
I will send that to the select board tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Thank you.
Yeah.
But do we
That's
want to
good.
review the names? Do we want to go through it tonight, just so we're kind of prepared for next week, just to kind of vote on these, or?
Yeah, I thought that's what the.
I sort of feel like we could just review them offline and then be up to speed. I don't know if you're, like, for example, on Concom, there's 2 openings and there's only 2 applicants.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know that we need to go through their backgrounds right now. I'm not opposed
Mhm.
to it if you think, but I think we could each go through them and see. I doubt there's that many where we have more candidates than openings.
No, I don't think there's any actually, but
Yeah.
We
So-
do
I
have a
think that
few,
was-
we do have a few new appointments, like there's a new appointment that wants to come forward for the Agricultural Commission. I believe that there is a new appointment for Council on Aging. There's a new appointment for the Traffic Safety. There's 2 new appointments. So
And I
I can
think-
send out the condensed list tomorrow.
Yeah, I think, why don't we do it on the 16th?
right.
Yes, I was planning on bringing them back for the appointments.
And Jeff, one thing I just want to bring up on that is, just because we have the number of applicants for the number of spots, doesn't
Yes.
necessarily mean
That's true.
that if somebody's not qualified, they shouldn't be appointed. Whether it's an open, whether, we've just got to review the applicants. I mean, I'm very excited to see how many new applicants we have. It seems like
Yep.
for a lot of positions, there's a lot of new applicants this year, which is fantastic.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
And I think we've got some diversity of experience to add to some of these boards, which is very necessary, and it's not gonna, I think it's great.
We actually have a new applicant for the elderly housing, a new applicant for the personnel board. We have quite a few new applicants this time around.
So if I could get a word in edgewise here, on this list, Diane, what would really help me is to know the total number of positions on the board, the total number of vacancies, and the total number of applicants in a really simple chart. So if there's a 3-person board and we have to appoint 2 people and there's 2 applicants, it makes it clear. Doesn't mean that that's an automatic appointment, but it makes it clear what we're dealing with versus a situation where you've got a 3-person board and you've got 12 applicants. That's a whole different issue. And I couldn't tell from going through all these applicants whether or not there are any, I don't want to use the word contested, but any situation where there's more applicants than there are positions. It just didn't come off clearly. And also, when you think about balancing a commission, if you don't know how many, if you don't have the number of people who are on the commission, what the number of seats are in the commission, and you're thinking, well, we need to balance it with, adding maybe a lawyer to a board. But if you don't know, if there's already 4 lawyers on the board and you're going to add a 5th lawyer, you don't have that context to be able to really make that judgment. So it would make sense to know who's on the commission, what the vacancies are, and what the number, the applicants are.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Eric's got his hand up.
The
for a
only
while.
thing I won't have everybody's background, that the people that are currently on the boards, that sit on the boards now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have their backgrounds.
I think
We-
that's okay because we pretty
we-
much know them.
Yeah.
They're
Right.
quantities.
Yes, agreed. Eric?
Yeah, I was gonna basically iterate what Paul said, but I also want to add on to that, just if you can indicate if someone is a candidate for reappointment or a new appointee.
Yeah, I already have that. On the list I have at my office, it says reappointment or new. That's already on there.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for that, Diane.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, the item 10 is the proposed 40B Farm Road Homes and consideration of comments to mass housing.
So this is an easy one because so many people have asked for an extension of time that I think that the way we should proceed right now is to vote to seek that extension of time to allow all our committees to respond, rather than our trying to write something right now, because we don't even have a draft to work off of.
And I think, wasn't it time, when is the walkthrough? Is it the 14th, Paul? I forget when
Yes, it's the 14th. Yeah.
site visit is. So they can't really start until they've had the site visit. They can maybe do some legwork, but it doesn't give you much time from the 14th. So I can.
We have to compose a letter to DHCD requesting the extension, and we have documentation from several committees now as to why we need the extension. And of course, the select board needs an extension as well. So there was a question last meeting, when is a good time to submit that letter? We thought not too early, not too late. Maybe about now might be a good time, because we know that the site walk is on the 14th and our letter to DHCD is due the 20th.
So Eric, you want to weigh in on this?
So just curious, all the letters I saw, people asking for 30 days. Is anyone asking for anything different? You know, any of these committees, any boards, does anyone know? Is anyone asking, or is it
It
pretty much?
seemed like
everyone?
that was all of everybody asked for 30 days. When I read all those,
That's
because
what
those letters, I read them all, and I think 30 days was kind of the consensus.
I think it makes our part easy. You know, we have a general, you have unanimous, it sounds like it's unanimous consensus from the different boards. 30 days certainly seems reasonable. You know, we're not asking for a million years or anything like that. And I don't know if we can just authorize maybe Diane to send a letter out with just review, or just have something for our review on 16th. I'm fine either way.
I can also send just an email to mass housing, because I think that's how it was done in the past.
Right.
The previous town administrator just emailed mass housing and asked for a 30-day extension, and usually it was granted.
Yeah, it's almost automatic. But it's worth putting some effort into explaining why.
Right. With the site walk on the 14th, it doesn't give any boards time to meet and discuss and come up with a valid response. So I think it's an easy explanation.
And simply state, you've heard from this many boards and this many committees. You can, I don't know, if we'll list them and say they all request 30 days. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, Jeff, you could review the email if you like, but I think it should be submitted before the 16th, because.
Right.
Yeah, and we know, if we know it now, is it wise to have town council look at it quickly? You think, to have Chris Petrini? I would think, I would want him to
I don't see why not.
peruse the wording a little bit.
Absolutely.
So why don't you and I coordinate on that, Diane, and get Chris or Mike Terry or whoever he delegates.
That's not, yep, sounds like a plan.
Do we have the last email that went that successfully got an extension? Can we just simply take that and type over?
Yeah,
it?
we do, but it was literally, it was two sentences.
I mean,
and
you
it
might
was
not even need
granted.
council review it, to be honest. I mean, if you want to get it, that's fine. But if it's just like, we need 30 days because of blank, then I don't know.
I think for 15 days, it could be just 15 days in a blank, but for 30 days, you might want to justify it with, given our schedules, the fact we're all volunteers, it's summer, people are away.
Yeah, and the timing of the walkthrough.
Well, there's a lot of good rationales with the number of comments, no
Yeah.
question about it. I'm just simply questioning the use of council, that's all.
Yeah,
But
that's fine. We don't have to, but I don't think it would hurt either. Judy, you've been doing the calisthenics there. What do you want to tell us?
I just wanted to tell you on the last one on 41 North Main, we asked for a 15-day extension. I think that Mass Housing will give us a longer one because the original site visit was the 7th and it had to be rescheduled due to the consultant not being able to be there. We can also, Michael Busby from Mass Housing will be at the site walk on Tuesday. We can discuss it with him then too.
So why don't we do that? You can start drafting it, Diane, and then in the site walk, whoever is, I'm not able to attend, whoever's able to attend, maybe they can approach him and then we can send it out on the either later on the 14th or on the 15th.
Okay.
Does that seem like a plan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. I don't think we need to vote on that, do we?
Nope, I think we're good.
We're good. All right. The only thing remaining is routine business. Are there any select board members that have a report to make?
I have two.
Go ahead, George.
First, I just want to say last Thursday, I spoke at graduation on June 2nd. The 165 seniors graduated. It was a beautiful night. They do a great job with graduation at DS. Emotional night with, they honored Owen Bingham. And I just have to say, Kai Abbott gave one of the most amazing speeches I've ever heard with her honor to Owen Bingham. If you haven't watched it, go on YouTube and watch what she said that night. It was astounding. The other one was, I got an email from a resident that she wants to water flowers, and I actually see Susie Tyler on here and she might be able to help me with this. She goes to the resident goes up to the cemetery and wants to water the flowers for her mother's grave, and she said there's no water source up there. What is I just wanted to bring it up because I think if people wanted to be able to fill a water can, I wanted to get an idea of what's actually happening up there. Susie, do you have any information?
Yeah, well, I was waiting to be recognized.
Yes. It's hard to recognize you when you don't turn your camera on, dear. Go ahead.
I turned it on.
I know. Now you do.
I heard my name. Yeah, unfortunately, there hasn't been any water there for a year and a half, or I think we're coming into the second season. For those that don't know, there is a well at Pine Hill Cemetery. It's run by a gas-powered pump, and it runs for about 2-3 hours, and it would go up to a holding tank. And then from there, it was fed off in a 100-year-old system down to different faucets, and it was fed by gravity. And there's been, over the last 4 or 5 years, numerous leaks throughout the cemetery. And we had one summer, one faucet was backed into or driven into 3 different times. And so the minute there was a break in the system, all the water goes out of and it was only a 300-gallon holding tank, which my understanding was an old oil tank that was turned on end and welded up onto a stand. That was the holding tank for the cemetery, for the water. So no, there is no water at the cemetery. We did, I was able to get a tank, a plastic tank donated. And unfortunately, before it was even installed, somebody somehow, I don't know, proceeded to take something and put a great big hole in it. So again, there was just leak after leak after leak. And the Sherborn Pine Hill Cemetery is not the only cemetery that does not have a water source. I volunteer in the town of Middleborough where there are 30 cemeteries. I go to 2. One that does have a town provided faucet at the entrance. The other cemetery has the old hydrant where you crank it up and down and hope you can get water out of it. And that's the cemetery I will be at. And so I just made sure that I just took the top off of it, put a new leather washer on it, and got it working again this year. So I know it's an inconvenience. I'm sorry for everybody, but it's not unusual. And
One solution, could there be, I don't know who's here, Sean, maybe you can answer this. My friend Sarah actually suggested, because she wanted to water flowers at her mom's grave, was could we have like a filling station even at the fire station or something, which is right at the bottom of the hill?
Let's see what Sean and Zach have
Here
to
too.
say. They both
Yep.
have their hands raised. Sean, do you want to go first? Your hand was up first.
Yeah, unless he unmutes. I mean, you could certainly send him to 7 Butler Street. We can fill them. There's exterior water there. Fire station's a little tougher because you never know when you're going to catch people there.
Right. Zach, do you have any?
There's a pond at the bottom of the cemetery lane too, if they want to. I
Words pond.
wouldn't drink it, but
and the Eagle Project cleared it.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I have 8 generations in the town of Middleborough within 4 different cemeteries. And again, there's only one out of those that has water. And so I drive from my new town with about 20 gallons of water in the back of my truck, knowing that I have to provide water. And I'm sorry, it only takes not a lot of water for watering individual flowers
Yeah.
on the grave site.
I wanted to bring it up because it was a question from a resident.
I know it's an inconvenience, and I'm sorry, but it's a maintenance nightmare at the Pine Hill Cemetery. It's a gas powered pump that goes up to an old tank that failed, and every time we turn around, it's another leak, another leak, another leak, because it's all gravity fed. So
Understood.
once there's a leak, that 300 gallons is gone.
All right.
The good news is you have an irrigation system, though. That seems pretty positive. So Zach had his hand up next. Zach?
Yeah, so I'm actually aware of another town that has a cemetery, and the fire department was able to get a tank from a surplus equipment tank from the state, and that's something I could certainly look into, and do that and get it up there. We'd be more than happy to keep it topped off.
Yeah, and even based on the location, with you guys being right where people turn in, I mean, they could even, if there was any way to just have something to fill there, if it's easier to maintain there than up on the hill.
And I'd be more than happy to do that too, obviously, because we're right here. So either way, we'll definitely work with them and get something done.
Okay, thanks.
I'll talk to you, Zach.
Thank you.
Marion, did you want to add to that?
I have a separate.
Separate select board report.
Yeah, I'm all set. So go ahead, Marion.
Okay, go, Marion.
So this is a quickie. Diane called me this week because she had gotten a very distressed phone call from a resident who was quite sure that the 5G network installed near her home was making her sick. And it may not be the last time we hear about this, as 5G goes up around town everywhere. And I don't know how extensive it is in Sherborn right now. But so I thought, well, we should at least, Diane called me because she thought I might have some data on this for some reason. And I didn't, but I did consult an epidemiologist who spent his whole career studying electromagnetic fields and health effects thereof. And he directed me to the latest review article on it. If you want to get into it, which I won't tonight, don't worry. It's a very complicated question, but I do have a sort of last scientific opinion on it, which we can use in the future if we get more questions of that sort.
So could I respond to that?
Sure.
Most of my towns have adopted 5G policies. We've started off with the Board of Selectmen adopting a policy, and then we've gone to town meeting to make it into bylaws, so that the 5G rollouts has to have some government oversight to make sure that these installations are aesthetically compatible with the community. They aren't interfering with other installations, and so on and so on. And you've triggered the thought in my mind that I don't think we have any 5G regulations at all. So we're like a wild west, wide open town here. And it may make sense for us to, follow the mainstream communities and get some things on the books that would preserve the character of our community.
I can see the aesthetics, being able to regulate the aesthetics, being able to regulate the strength of the electromagnetic
You can't.
signals. You can't, of course. So either you accept 5G in the town or you don't. Eric, you probably know more about this than I do.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see Paul's bylaws. I've looked into this a little bit. I think the community can only regulate those that are actually put on municipal structures and municipal buildings on land. When something's put on a utility pole, municipality can only regulate utility poles and gas mains and stuff like that under the grant allocation process of how it sits within the public right of way. The owner of that pole has pretty much by right to put any utility they want to some degree on that pole. And I think the 5Gs serve as a utility. It's no different than hanging up a cable for Comcast. So I don't know if we have any say, and this probably deserves its own agenda item. And I've done some research on it a few years ago. So in Framingham, we had the same proposal there. And I think it has very little say as if they want to put 5G on utility poles. And I don't think they're proposing on Sherborn buildings. We just don't have that many. When you go to other municipalities, there's a bunch of them, and they're in dense areas and crowded areas. They get a lot of coverage. In Sherborn, to some degree, I'm surprised if there's enough even density to make 5G worth it. But if it is, they're probably putting it on the poles. And I'm near certain we have very, very little, if not zero say of them putting on a pole. That they are regulated as utility, and utility has a right to go on a pole if the pole owner does it. The only way you can have some control on it if a municipality actually buys the poles and takes them over. And then we just might as well make our DPW triple in size and own lift trucks and everything else. In other words, something I don't think we'd ever want to engage in doing.
So I beg to differ with you on that. There is some jurisdiction here. And one of the things we're seeing is it's not just putting antennas on poles. There actually are ground installations that go with this at periodic places. I forget the word for it. It's like tombstones or whatever it is, but there are these cabinets and all kinds of related features. And one of my towns actually has a program where the ground features have to be painted in attractive ways, as opposed to these industrial looking features that are along the side of the road. So I'm only suggesting that if there's a 5G rollout going on in the town, we find out more about it, and that we take a look at adopting something that was going to require it to be brought before the select board so that we know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't want to beat this up, but those cabinets are actually a new structure, so they're put under the grant allocation process in the right of way.
Sean had a comment, but I'm not sure if he still does. Sean.
I was just going to comment that there's at least 3 cell towers owned by the on-town property. So, and there's actually RFPs going out. We may want to address that before we put the RFPs out. Those were approved at town meeting.
Good point. Very good point.
Yeah, we're talking to Verizon. I was under the impression though that the 5G is mainly a fairly small cylinder that's on the pole. It only has a range of about 1.5 miles. I think too. That's the problem with 5G is it's very distributed system. So
like a can. It's a white
yeah,
can.
it looks like a cylindrical can. Exactly. It's not very big, but it's not really that good an application in rural areas. I don't think.
But they can put
I'm
them on a
sitting
cell
at 1
phone.
Butler Street, and I got a pretty good 5G signal right here.
Do you?
Yeah, I don't know where it's coming from, but
Well, it would be good to know what's going up around town just for our own edification. And it could be that, in the future, we'll get more citizen calls about 5G and health, because it is sort of an open issue in the epidemiology community, but it's by no means resolved. So there are no clear answers, but it's very unlikely that for 99% of the population, it has any effect whatsoever. Anything greater than the cell phone held up to your ear, for example.
That's what I was gonna say. How much harm is coming from the actual cell phone in your pocket or
Exactly.
at all
So blame it
times?
on your cell phone, not on the 5G network. Anyway, it's just good to be aware of it. It may come.
Paul, did you have another point you want to make, or your hands still
Oh,
up?
yeah. No, I was going to say something about Memorial Day, that the town had a really wonderful celebration on Memorial Day, and Jeff Waldron was there, and Eric Johnson was there, and Mike Kickham did his usual wonder and organized it. And there were more Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts there than in recent memory. It was a very moving event. And I wanted to thank those who attended, and the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, and the fact that we need to remember that Memorial Day isn't just about sitting back and relaxing on that day. It's a day to remember that people died, gave their lives so the rest of us could be free. Thanks.
And Diana Hoke also did a very good job too, our veterans agent. So I agree with that. So Diane, you listed, I don't know if you have a town administrator report, and then you also listed the meeting calendar.
Yeah,
don't
I
know-
just have the meeting calendar, Jeff, that I thought the board should look at and, vote tonight.
What
save
about
it
if
for
we
next
just,
week?
what about if we just review it and vote a week from tonight?
Okay,
People can then look at their calendars and,
So I
okay.
had one objection to one date,
okay,
which was December 22nd.
okay.
3 days, a Thursday before the
Uh-huh.
Christmas weekend. It just seemed like
We got to
of
approve
all the
snow and ice
things
budget.
for a board of selectmen to do is to meet like the last real business day before the Christmas holiday is in full swing. And just, I would suggest doing it a week earlier or a week later.
That's fine.
The
Then
week
you'll be-
between Christmas and New Year's is tough, but
Yeah,
I would say a lot of times in December, if our agendas are light, I
yeah,
just leave it as a placeholder, and if hopefully we'll be able to cancel it and get all our business done. And if like the week meeting before we decide we need another meeting, we could do it the following week. I agree with you, Paul. We're probably not gonna want to meet that day, but
so right now we have the 16th and we have the 30th right now, so the end of June, right?
Correct.
So I think we're good, and maybe if we just do have I didn't see it, but maybe I wasn't paying attention. Is there a list in there of all the proposed dates
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
Yes.
packet?
yeah.
So why don't we all review that and then we'll vote on it next Thursday? Is that all right with
Perfect.
everyone?
Yep.
And just on an exception basis, if there's something that you can't do. All right. Well, thanks for your patience,
We'll make a
everyone.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's
I
been a
already moved,
pleasure once
Eric.
again.
All right. Paul,
Aye.
Marion,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
and I as well. Thanks for doing this to me, guys. Appreciate it.
Good luck.
You're gonna
Night.
be a good new chair, Jeff. We've got all the confidence in you.
Good
Absolutely.
night. Good night, guys.
Good
Good
night.
night.